Hey everybody, it's Sunday, June 19, 2016. Tonight, the Cleveland Cavaliers play at Golden State in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. It will be broadcasted on ABC at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Tonight's game will determine the 2016 NBA champions. Will it be the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Golden State Warriors? In this video, I give you my prediction, I go through my thought process, and I discuss some X factors that may influence the outcome of the game. All right. First of all, let's look at injuries. Injuries are something that a lot of people don't check and a lot of people don't appreciate, especially when it's to non-star players. Injuries to Steph Curry or LeBron James, of course, would affect people's perception of the game. But injuries to non-star players tend to be ignored by the general public, but are important. The Cleveland Cavaliers are healthy and have no injuries. The Golden State Warriors have 2 injuries. The center, 7-foot center Andrew Bogut, is out with a knee injury. He did not play in Game 6, and he will not play tonight in Game 7. Andrew Bogut, center, 7 foot tall. Andrew Iguodala will play tonight, but he has a back injury. And watching Game 6, his back symptoms were limiting. Could he be 100% tonight? Maybe. I don't think so. He clearly was limited and restricted by his back symptoms. So we won't know until tonight, but I believe that his back will keep him from being 100%. And that will impact a game, especially considering that the center is also out. So this is something to consider. Now, another thing to consider is this, because this year's finals is a rematch of the 2015 finals. Last year, in 2015, it was Cleveland and it was Golden State. But the situation is different. Last year, Kyrie Irving played in one game and was injured and missed the rest of the finals. So last year there was no Kyrie Irving. This year, the Cleveland Cavaliers do have Kyrie Irving, and he's healthy and he's productive. So using last year as a reference point, the absence of Kyrie Irving last year, which was a negative, and the presence of Kyrie Irving this year, which is a huge positive, is a significant X factor in the category of injuries. So that's something to consider too. I mean, it's a year ago, but I remembered it, and I believe that is a significant consideration. So these are the issues. Andrew Bogut, the center, 7 foot tall, is out. Bogut, B-O-G-U-T. Andrew Iguodala is playing, but had back symptoms in Game 6, and I believe that he won't be 100% tonight. And I think that these 2 injuries will impact Golden State. And on the Cleveland side, there are no injuries. But furthermore, last year, there was no Kyrie Irving. This year, there is Kyrie Irving for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So consider that when trying to forecast this game. Okay. Injuries are important. It's boring for some people. It's interesting to me. But it is a deeper layer of analysis that a lot of people don't do. And the general public generally doesn't. All right. The general public usually just follows the short narrative that's presented to them. Okay. Now, another thing to consider is, okay, well, here's another thing let's consider. One of the things that people will say is, hey, Golden State has home court advantage. One thing I'd like to say is home court is not always an advantage. Sometimes being at home is a disadvantage. It's a distraction. You have families and friends contacting you, asking you for tickets, etc. So the assumption is the home court is an advantage, but sometimes home court is not an advantage. In basketball, and it is statistically proven in the NBA, but especially more in college, but in the NBA, there is a home court advantage. I believe that there's probably two variables in play in home court advantage. Again, sometimes teams don't have a home court advantage. It's a distraction, it's a disadvantage. But when teams do have a home court advantage, and in the NBA, there is a statistical home court advantage in general. I believe it's for two factors. One, it is the crowd and crowd participation. I think that it can boost the performance of the home team, but maybe it gives the home team performance anxiety. But I do believe that the crowd participation, positive feedback, does help the players. Okay. I also believe that another factor in basketball is very dependent, actually all sports, but basketball is very dependent on visual spatial cues. It's a three-dimensional sport, 4 dimensions if you include time. There's a lot of physics involved, and passing the ball, shooting the ball is a three-dimensional process. Now, we as humans may not realize it, but it's not just the 4 borders of the court and the goal, which are the reference points, but the whole stadium, the whole venue is a reference point. So where the home court advantage comes from is from familiarity. However, I do believe that as the road teams play more at that venue, I believe that the home court advantage diminishes from a visual spatial perspective. Okay. So let's say you've never played at Golden State. The first time you have to get oriented spatially, visually. But the more you play, that disadvantage goes away, is minimized or goes away. Now Cleveland, this is game 7. So Cleveland has played already 3 games at Golden State at that venue in recent time. And in the last game on June 13th, Cleveland won at Golden State at that venue. So I would have to say that the visual spatial disadvantage of being on the road team has been reduced. Also, in this particular context, the Cleveland Cavaliers may have less distractions. I think that there may be more distractions for the home team. Just imagine if you're the home team. When you're the road team, you're coming in. Your family's at, your home team's at home, away. You're coming in, and you're looking to conquer a foreign nation or a foreign country. And you don't have to worry about, you have less things to worry about. What I'm trying to say is, I don't think home court is, there's various factors in home court, but I believe that the home court issues counteract each other. So I would say that in aggregate, in sum, the home court will not advantage one team over the other. Okay, and that's the nature of the playoffs. It's 7 games. So the Cleveland Cavaliers are the road team, but I believe that they have enough familiarity with the venue at this point. Another thing to also consider too is this: people like to look at offense. Offense is fun. That's why people, maybe that's why the NBA is more popular to the general public than, for example, like hockey. I like hockey. I like defense. I like struggle. I like that. I like that it's hard to score. Basketball is different. Basketball is all offense. In fact, uh, it it's almost as if the rules make it hard to play defense. But anyway, defense is a part of the game. Winning the final score is you got to score more than your opponent. That's offense minus defense, and it's simple arithmetic. It's simple math. Defense is 50% of of winning. You can't escape the math of it. Okay, but everybody looks at offense, and I do too. And people don't look at defense. So a lot of times people don't look at people are not as interesting or not as interested in defensive teams. For example, San Antonio Spurs. Oh, they're not. They're a boring team. But hey, defense wins championships. So things to look at is defense as well as point differential. All right, so these are the stats from the regular season. So let's look at these quote unquote boring stats of defense. Defense is so boring. Okay. Alrighty, so let's look at this. So this is in the regular season. The boring stats of defense. Okay. San Antonio Spurs allowed only 92.9 points per game. So 93 or less. That's a reference point. They're number one. Cleveland was number 4. They're essentially tied at number 3. So San Antonio allowed 93 points per game. Utah, 96 points per game. Toronto and Cleveland were 98 points per game. Okay. A lot of people don't check these kind of things. Where's Golden State in this? Golden State. So basically, you could say in the regular season, Cleveland Cavaliers are number 3 on defense. Where's Golden State? They're 19th. They allowed 104 points per game. Okay. So that's 104 versus Cleveland's 98. So looking only at the defense and looking at the opponent's points that were allowed, Cleveland's 98, Golden State's 104. Total of 6 points difference on the defensive metric. Okay. Now let's look at the offense. Oh yeah, and this goes back to, especially in college football. You know, people look at teams like Baylor and Oregon, and it's almost kind of like, well, what about the defense? Anyway, so going back to basketball here. Golden State Warriors have number 1 offense, basically 115 points per game, and Cleveland is 104. So that's a 10-point spread there. Then let's look at the differential. Differential is points scored minus points allowed. Golden State's number 1 at 10.8. Cleveland is 4. So actually, the more important stat would probably be the point differential. And in this thing here, Golden State's almost plus 11, Cleveland's plus 6. All right. Now, let's look. That's the regular season. Let us look at the playoffs. The advantages of the regular season is that it's got a larger sample size. There's 82 games in the regular season. When we look at the postseason, there's less sample size, but it's still useful to look at this. This is postseason playoffs. That's on the right. All right. In the postseason, if you look at differential, Cleveland, number 1 is San Antonio Spurs. The differential is 9. Cleveland is number 2 at 8.9. So San Antonio is 9.1. Cleveland is 8.9. Basically tied for number 1. Where's Golden State? 4.7. In the playoffs, Cleveland Cavaliers have a better point differential than Golden State. And if you look at offense, defense, and point differential correlates with winning more than offense by itself or defense by itself. When you combine it into offense points scored minus defense points allowed and look at the point differential, offense minus defense, it is more strongly correlated with offense. Again, it's just a correlation. But in the playoffs, Cleveland actually has a better point differential. Cleveland +9, Golden State +5. Okay. Now, another thing that affects people perception is this. All right. People look at Golden State, and I've always kind of felt this. And look, I love 3-pointers too, but here's the problem with 3-pointers. I mean, Steph Curry is amazing, but in general, it's a low percentage shot versus a layup. Okay. But again, a 3-point shot, people are like, wow, 3 points. But it's only one more than a 2-point shot. Okay. And here's a trade-off. In general, a layup, which is a 2-point shot, or an easy 2-point shot, is a higher percentage shot. But people look at the 3-point shot and they're just like, wow. Especially Steph Curry, he's shooting it from almost half court. It is amazing, I agree. But let's look at the math here. So Golden State, again, this is in the regular season. The 3-point percentage of Golden State in the regular season was 41.6. Cleveland is 36. They're not a bad 3-point shooting team. So you're like, wow, almost 42% Golden State. And that's amazing. Okay. Cleveland is 36. Let's look at the playoffs. Okay, on the right on the playoffs, Cleveland's 3-point percentage is 41%. Golden State is 39.5. So actually in the playoffs, Cleveland, from a percentage standpoint, is a better 3-point shooting team. See, it's all about perception. Perception versus reality. There's a lot of misperception, okay? The reality is, in the playoffs, Cleveland is a better 3-point shooting team. They have made 41% of their 3-pointers. Golden State has made 39.5. It's almost the same, but the perceived advantage of Golden State in 3-point shooting is not there in the playoffs. All right. Another way to look at it is this. Let's look at 3 points made per game. Now, I like numbers. I like finding truth. I like digging this kind of stuff. It helps me understand and appreciate the game more. Some people don't. One of the things that I have an issue with a lot of the general media websites and TVs, they don't present this information. You have to dig in for it. But then you find some interesting things. This is fun for me. So, okay, this is in the regular season. 3 points made. This is per game. 13 Golden State. Wow, that's amazing, right? But it's always about, everything's relative. You got to compare to other teams. So then Cleveland, in this case, we have to compare to Cleveland. Cleveland is not, they're making 10.7. So per game, Golden State makes 13, and they're making ESPN highlights, right? Cleveland is making almost 11 3-pointers per game. So the difference is 13 minus 11. So Golden State makes 2 more 3-pointers per game. Okay? But remember, it's all relative. The 3-pointer is relative to the 2-pointer. That's only a 1-point difference. And in general, the 3-pointer is a lower percentage shot than, for example, a layup, okay, or a dunk. So, yes, Golden State making 13 3-pointers per game sounds amazing, right? But again, everything's relative. Golden State's 13, Cleveland is 11. And again, 3-point play, you have to compare that to a 2-point play. That's only a one point differential difference. So in the regular season, Golden State scores 2 more 3-pointers per game. Again, everything is relative in sports. It's one team versus another. Okay. Now let's look, all right, at the playoffs. Now in the playoffs, this will be interesting. Golden State makes 12.7 3-pointers per game. Cleveland makes 12.6. They make the same number of 3-pointers per game. Okay? Now, other statistics might be skewed by sample size and by the opponent and venue. But I think the 3 points made per game and percentage, it's a pretty sound statistic by this point. in the playoffs. The playoffs are relatively long. There's a decent amount of sample size here. Okay, so Cleveland makes 12.6, Golden State makes 12.7. The perception is that Golden State has a huge advantage in the three-point statistic, which it doesn't. And then the perception is that three-pointers are so much better than a two-pointer, and it's not. Okay. And if the three-pointer, if you're not hitting those three-pointers, what's Plan B? Okay. There's a reason why in general. There's a reason why the proverb of defense wins championships, and there's still and there's also a reason why teams that rebound, teams that are good around the basket, win championships. Defense and the physical play around the net, I think those are more important factors in winning championships. But isn't this exciting to know that Cleveland and Golden State make the same number of three-pointers in the playoffs? And in fact, by a percentage standpoint, Cleveland is a better three-point shooting team. So the advantage is not there. Okay. So let's look at this. Injuries, Cleveland has an advantage. They're healthy. They have Kyrie Irving this year. They didn't have it last year. Golden State is disadvantaged. Their center Bogut is out, 7 foot tall. Okay, maybe he's not on the stat sheets, but 7 foot tall dude not having him is a problem. Iguodala, back injury. Will he be 100%? I don't think so. He'll play, but I don't think he's going to be at 100%. And you know what? Not being 100% is a problem when you're having to play against LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. I mean, these are elite athletes. You go down a few percentage points, you're ineffective. Okay. Then, looking at the not so often looked at statistic of defense, you got to give the edge to to Cleveland. Cleveland has the advantage on defense. Cleveland has the advantage on defense. All right. Let's see here. Cleveland in the postseason. Okay. In the playoffs, Cleveland has only allowed 96.5 points per game. Golden State allows 103.8. So it's basically 97 versus 104. Similar to the regular season. Okay. So Cleveland has an advantage on defense. In the postseason playoffs, Cleveland has an advantage on point differential. On offense, Cleveland in the playoffs scores 105 points per game versus Golden State 103 points per game. Golden State is perceived to have a huge advantage on offense. You're not seeing this on the stats, though. Do you see the scales are falling off your eyes? Okay. So in the playoffs, Golden State, okay, scores 108 points per game, 108.5. Cleveland's 105.4. So that's a difference of 3. Golden State's better by 3. On defense, Cleveland is better on defense than Golden State. And point differential, Cleveland has advantage. 3-point shooting, percentage, Cleveland's better. 3 points made per game, Cleveland, Golden State are the same. Okay. Injuries, Cleveland has an advantage. Defense, Cleveland has an advantage. Point differential, Cleveland has an advantage. Okay. 3-point shooting, Cleveland is the same, which is an advantage perceptually. And offensively, Golden State has a slight advantage, not by much. It's only by 3 points. Again, Golden State has an advantage, but the real advantage is small compared to the perceived advantage. So the reality is Cleveland should be favored in this game. But in Vegas, they have Golden State as a favorite -5. Okay. That number actually kind of correlates if you look with the regular season numbers. That's where they get that -5. I would have to say, people are wondering how do they make these point differentials. Okay, let's see here. Golden State was 10.8 in the regular season. Cleveland is 6, so 10.8 minus 6. That's 4.8 is 5. So that's how the Vegas lines makers made that line. I've looked at this. A lot of the basketball point spreads fit in with the point differentials. So when you subtract the Golden State point differential from the Cleveland point differential from the regular season, you basically get the Vegas line. And they didn't adjust too much for home court and injuries. So anyway, my argument is this: if you look at the postseason statistics, just statistically, Cleveland should be the favorite. They shouldn't be an underdog by 5. Okay. And so, again, let's summarize this. Each category, X factors. Injuries, Cleveland has advantage. In the postseason, defense, Cleveland has advantage. Point differential, Cleveland has an advantage. Offense, Golden State has an advantage, but only by 3 points. So this is a smaller advantage than the general public would perceive. 3-point shooting percentage, Cleveland, about the same as Golden State, but actually a little bit better. 3 points made per game, Cleveland and Golden State score the same number of 3-pointers per game. All right. Then physicality, the advantage goes to Cleveland, especially with the injuries to the center and back symptoms of Iguodala. And when you watch the game, it's like Cleveland owns the center of the court around the rim. When you see that kind of pattern, usually that team is physically dominating the other team. Home court for Golden State, not an advantage, perhaps a distraction. Okay, you got this. Cleveland doesn't have any expectations. Hunger, I'll give that to Cleveland. Losing makes you hungry. Okay, it's just human nature. Golden State has won. They won last year's championship, and they've been winning all season long. It's a different mentality when you're the underdog. So, as you can see from this progression, my prediction is that the Cleveland Cavaliers will win Game 7 and be the 2016 NBA champions. And I will say this: you look at the numbers, but in the end, you got to consider team chemistry, matchups, physicality, intangibles, coaching, decision-making of the players, decision-making of the coaches, refs, business interests, etc., yada, yada, considering all those kind of things. And you have to consider, there's a certain amount of randomness in sports. So you're trying to predict. But the reality is you just need to be right about 60% of the time. And you need to stay humble and don't ever think that you're ever going to be right 100% of the time. Humility is a big thing. Humility doesn't mean weakness or a lack of confidence. Humility is just knowing that you don't know everything. But given all those caveats and footnotes, my prediction for tonight, Game 7, is the Cleveland Cavaliers win the game. Okay? They will definitely cover the plus 5 point spread. They're the underdogs, so they will cover. So Cleveland Cavaliers win Game 7, and the Cleveland Cavaliers will be the 2016 NBA champions. Cleveland Cavaliers. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your support.